In the last 10 months, the Pentagon committed $30 billion to artificial intelligence software. Not over 5 years, not over a decade. 10 months. Think about that. That's a Manhattan project's worth of money, in today's dollars, spent on chatbots, on targeting tools, on battle software, paid in cash, on contract. And it happened while OpenAI loses money, while Meta and Google argue about AI returns, while the rest of the AI economy is still debating whether a business model even exists. There is one customer in the AI economy that already wrote one. And the man at the center of that customer is not Sam Altman. It is not Jensen Huang. He is a 58-year-old philosophy PhD who keeps Tai Chi swords in his office, doesn't know how to drive, and just told Wall Street his biggest problem is, quote, "We cannot meet demand." His name is Alex Karp, and this is the year nobody saw. Let's get the number right, because it is the entire point. On July 31st, 2025, the US Army gave Palantir a single contract worth up to $10 billion over 10 years. That deal did something unusual. It took 75 separate Palantir contracts and rolled them all into one giant umbrella deal. 7 months later, on March 14th, 2026, the Army did the same thing with Anduril. $20 billion, 10 years, 120 separate contract paths collapsed into one. 2 software companies, 2 enterprise contracts, $30 billion in spending caps signed in the last 10 months, both AI first. Now, and this matters, those are spending caps, not money already spent. They are the maximum the Pentagon can buy if it uses every option in the contract. But this is also how the Pentagon used to buy fighter jets and tanks. Software just got the same treatment. That $30 billion sits inside a much bigger picture. This is the first year in US history that the national defense budget crossed $1 trillion. And inside that trillion, for the very first time, the Pentagon carved out $13.4 billion just for AI and autonomous systems, not buried in cybersecurity, not buried in IT, its own line. Most of that money, about $9.4 billion, goes to drones. Another $1.7 billion goes to autonomous ships. The rest covers software, ground robots, and underwater systems. This is the moment, in budget terms, when the Pentagon stopped treating AI like a science project and started buying it like a weapon system. So, when you hear $30 billion in 10 months, here is what it really means. The US military is now the biggest enterprise software customer the AI industry has ever had. And it is paying in cash. Not equity, not promises. Cash, on a contract, every quarter. For the next 10 years. That has happened exactly 6 times in American history. We will get to that. First, who is selling? On May 1st, the Pentagon announced something that will reshape the next 10 years of AI. 8 companies were cleared to deploy their AI on the Pentagon's classified networks. Not the unclassified ones. Not the regular government cloud. The actual top-tier classified systems where targeting decisions and intelligence analysis live. The list has a structure. Read it carefully. At the model layer, the actual AIs. There are 4. OpenAI, Google, SpaceX, which now owns the company formerly called xAI after a $1.25 trillion all-stock acquisition in February. And a startup almost no one has heard of called Reflection AI. At the compute layer, the chips, there is one. NVIDIA. At the classified cloud layer, where the data lives, there are 3. Microsoft, Amazon Web Services, Oracle, 8 firms, 3 layers, 1 stack. The surprise on this list is Reflection AI. It is a pre-product company, founded in 2024 by 2 former DeepMind researchers, Misha Laskin, who led reward modeling on Gemini, and Ioannis Antonoglou, who co-created AlphaGo. $2 billion in funding at an $8 billion valuation, with NVIDIA as one of the backers. They have not shipped a single model yet, and they are now on the Pentagon's classified networks list. What Reflection sells is not exactly a model. It is a category. Open source AI made in America that the Pentagon can run on its own isolated servers. No need to depend on China's open source models. Their pitch is American DeepSeek. That pitch just became something the Pentagon will pay for. Now you might notice a name missing from this list. Two names, actually. Anthropic, which makes Claude, the first frontier AI model the Pentagon ever deployed on classified networks, and the one most inside the Department of Defense considered the best at the work. Anthropic is not on the list. Palantir, which runs the actual targeting platform inside the Pentagon, the software the Army just paid $10 billion for, is not on the list either. Those are two very different reasons. Palantir is missing because it doesn't sell what those 8 companies sell. Its software runs on top of all of them, with 20,000 active users across all 5 military branches. In March, the Pentagon made Palantir's Maven platform a program of record. Bureaucratic language for "this is now permanent." Maven is the platform everything else plugs into. Anthropic is missing for a completely different reason. Anthropic was kicked out. Let me lay this out as plainly as I can. Whenever the Pentagon signs a software contract, there is a standard clause. It says the vendor has to allow the software to be used for, quote, all lawful purposes. That phrase sounds boring. It is not boring. For Anthropic, all lawful purposes meant 2 things they refused to do. First, Claude could be used to pick targets and fire on them, fully automatic, with no human signing off. Second, Claude could be used for mass surveillance of American citizens. Dario Amodei, Anthropic's CEO, would not lift either restriction. Anthropic's existing policy already lets the US military use Claude for legal national security work. It just doesn't let it cross those 2 lines. The Pentagon wanted them crossed. Amodei said no. 9 months of negotiation broke down. And in late February of this year, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, did something that has never been done to an American technology company before. He officially designated Anthropic a, quote, supply chain risk. That label is normally reserved for foreign adversaries. China, Russia, Iran. Anthropic became the first US firm ever to wear it. Anthropic sued 2 federal courts March 9th. Their argument was simple. The Pentagon was punishing Anthropic for speaking up, and that's a First Amendment violation. On March 26th, Judge Rita Lin of the Northern District of California granted Anthropic an injunction. Her ruling had one sentence worth reading word for word. Quote, nothing in the governing statute supports the Orwellian notion that an American company may be branded a potential adversary and saboteur of the United States for expressing disagreement with the government. Orwellian, from a federal judge, about the Pentagon's treatment of an American AI lab. And here is the contradiction the public didn't fully understand yet. The day after Hegseth blacklisted Anthropic, the Pentagon used Anthropic's own model anyway. Claude, running inside Palantir's Maven, was used to pick targets in the first 24 hours of the US-Israel campaign in Iran. Same model, same week, different licenses. Anthropic learned about the use after the fact. That was the moment the lawsuit became inevitable. The Pentagon excluded Anthropic from the 8-firm classified networks cohort on May 1st. Pentagon CTO Emil Michael told reporters, quote, it's irresponsible to be reliant on any one partner. Anthropic, he said, didn't really want to work with us in the way we wanted to work with them. 6 days later, on May 7th, Katie Sutton, the Pentagon's cyber policy chief, stood at a defense conference and called Anthropic's newest model, Mythos, a, quote, huge opportunity. Mythos had spotted roughly 300 previously unknown security flaws in Mozilla Firefox alone. Flaws hackers could exploit, tens of thousands more across other software. The NSA had been quietly testing Mythos on Microsoft systems for weeks. So at the same moment, the Pentagon excludes Anthropic for warfighting. And the NSA, part of that same intelligence community, depends on Anthropic for cyber. That is not a coherent policy. That is the price of admission being negotiated in real time. Now you understand why Alex Karp is the man at the center of this story. Karp signed, Anthropic refused, and Karp's company just delivered the kind of quarter that makes Wall Street analysts double-check the math. On May 4th, Palantir reported its first quarter for fiscal year 2026. Total revenue, $1.63 billion, up 85% from the year before. the fastest growth Palantir has posted since it went public in 2020. US revenue $1.28 billion, up 104%. The first time in Palantir's history that US revenue grew more than 100% in a single quarter. US government revenue alone $687 million in 3 months, up 84%. And that is accelerating from 66% the quarter before. Palantir raised its full-year revenue target to $7.65 billion, up 71%. Now, the single number Wall Street really cares about for software companies is something called the Rule of 40. It is simple. Revenue growth plus operating margin. Anything over 40 is excellent. Palantir reported a Rule of 40 score of 145. In the analyst call, Karp said 2 things worth keeping. The first, quote, "We always prioritize the US warfighter over everything else." The second is more interesting. "Our biggest problem currently in the US is that we just cannot meet demand. A CEO whose biggest problem is too many customers." And here is the close intention. Despite that quarter, despite Rule of 40 145, despite 85% revenue growth, despite a $687 million government quarter, Palantir's stock is down nearly a quarter year to date. The market priced the win in before the win actually happened. And now, it wants to see what comes next. So how should we think about a moment like this? There is a useful precedent. Not the Manhattan Project, not Apollo, not Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative. The closest analog is something most people have never heard of, a system called SAGE. In 1955, the US Air Force started buying digital computers from IBM at a scale never attempted before for a single program called the Semi-Automatic Ground Environment. SAGE, 56 computers, roughly $30 million apiece in 1950s money. The whole program cost more than the Manhattan Project. The Air Force was the dominant customer for the entire commercial computing industry for a decade. What did all that buy? It bought IBM's commercial mainframe business, real-time computing, modems. Most of the digital world we live in today came out of that decade because the Pentagon, during the installation phase of digital computing, was the customer of record. That window, Pentagon as the anchor customer for a frontier technology, has happened, depending on how you count, 6 times in American history. Radar in the 1940s, SAGE, integrated circuit, in the 1960s, ARPANET, GPS, now AI. These windows tend to last 6 to 10 years before regular companies start spending more than the military does. AI is currently in roughly year 2 of that window. But here is the difference between Pentagon AI and consumer AI. Big tech's spending on AI is investment, a bet on what they'll earn from it later. The Pentagon's spending is revenue, today, on a contract. That is the customer the consumer AI economy did not know it had. It is the customer Alex Karp built his entire company around. And right now, in 2026, it is the only customer in the AI economy actually paying cash. Don't watch OpenAI. Watch the procurement page.